Hi all, I'm Eric Youngstrom. I'm a professor of psychology and neuroscience at the University of North Carolina at Chapel Hill, and I'm also the co-founder and executive director of HGAPS, Helping Give Away Psychological Science. And with me in this session are Natalie Sharamit and John Miller, who are extraordinary contributors that I've had the joy of working with for quite a while now in HGAPS. What we're talking about in this session is a way of tracking who is contributing in different ways to different projects to make sure that they get credit. The nickname for this is the AARF, the Authorship Agreement Registration Form. This is something that I've been using for decades, and I'm going to tell you how I got started, why I got started, and why I'm sharing this with HGAPS and with you guys. So I have been with my my partner, who is currently my wife. I met her in freshman year, first semester as an undergraduate, and we did it all through university, and then went to the same graduate program and worked in the same lab. And while we were working there, we collaborated a lot. I helped with statistics and things on her projects, and she helped with tracking down references and things on my projects. And so we were very involved with each other's work, and thought that we were going to be co-authors on papers, but then our professors said, no, it'll look like you're just throwing each other on each other's papers, and that won't be so. Even though Eric helped a lot with your project, we think that he shouldn't be an author on it. And even though so that that made me go, but what if we document all the ways that we're contributing, and so we started to write it down. And as we both became PhDs, as we both became psychologists, we kept working together, and I never stopped doing that, writing it down and showing here's how. So no, I'm not just throwing my wife on papers, and no, she's not just throwing me on papers. There were other experiences that also shaped my thinking about this. I've got some horror stories where I thought that I was going to be an author on a paper, and I wasn't. Um, at least one time it was just forgetting. It was an honest mistake from someone who liked me and did other papers with me later. But another time it was deliberate, and it was a surprise to me, and it was a surprise to my professor, who invited me and the other person to do the paper with them. Um, and it was really, it really hurt. It was really scary, because the paper was the paper got a revise and resubmit and then got accepted, and I listed it on my CV when I was hired for my first job, and then saw the journal and my name wasn't on it. I'm like, what? And I had a panic attack. I'm holding a paper journal in the library, and I'm like, am I going to get fired? Are they going to think that I lied about having this paper on my resume? um i i I really had a panic attack. And so those experiences of having people make assumptions about who was contributing or why they were authors, and having people make mistakes, people that like each other and continued to work together, just making mistakes, having a misunderstanding about authorship, and preventing getting screwed, getting taken advantage of. All of those are things that really I have lived experience. I'm like, yeah, I want a way to navigate all of those things. So that's what led to me doing this. And then after I'd been using this model, this system for a long time, I'm like, I need a name for it. I need a catchy name. I wanted to come up with a cool acronym. I couldn't. And my dog was barking. And I'm like, Greatsy, that's a wonderful suggestion. Yes, I can call it the ARF, the Authorship Agreement Registration Form. So my dog helped me name it. What is this ARF of which we speak? Well, it's a way of building a team and dividing up the work, and then checking how did everyone actually wind up able to contribute, having a discussion about authorship. And then in real life, you never get a paper accepted on the first try. The best that you're hoping for is a revise and resubmit, which is more work. So then discussing how are we dividing up the more work that we have to do to get the win for the team. And you can keep iterating this until you actually get the grant, get the paper accepted. What it is basically a spreadsheet with two parts to it. On the left-hand side is a whole bunch of tracking information and ways of keeping the project organized, knowing where all the pieces are. This doesn't find its way into the publication. This isn't the heart of the ARF, but it's really helpful to have everything in one place all together. The core part of the ARF is a table. And as we're looking at this table, what we see is each column is a person. Each row is a thing that would contribute to building and getting the article published. So rows are activities or pieces of work, and columns are people. So let's look at the roles first. The roles are different activities that contribute to making a paper. The ones that are in peach are ones that are formally recognized by journals now using the credit taxonomy for giving authors credit for contributions for things that are submitted to their journals. So all the things that are sort of peach colored are, hey, this is something that will map directly to a spreadsheet that journals will ask you to provide. You've got a long author list. What exactly did each person contribute to deserve authorship? The ones that are not peach are the ones that I've added over the years. So for different papers, different projects that we've been working on, these are all of the other roles that I have ever seen attached to a paper. So conceptualization is coming up with the idea in the first place. This is the stroking the chin. Yes, I have an idea for a paper. And funding acquisition would be if there was a grant that paid for the data collection or for the writing of the paper, who actually wrote that grant, who secured the funding for it. And the methodology is what are the measures that we're using, what interviews, what tasks, what are we planning for the analyses. Resources is providing the space for the interviews or the Zoom account to be able to do things long distance. Project administration is the role that the water carriers and project leaders and HGAPS are filling. So if you're the water carrier for a project, I would encourage you to get points in that row. Investigation, data curation. Data curation is the getting the data ready to share with the person doing the analysis. So in many of the projects that have been happening with HGAPS using data from the Depression and Bipolar Support Alliance site or the HGAPS Assessment Center, I've been the data curator who is pulling the data down from Qualtrics or wherever, making sure that it is anonymous, making sure that there's no minimal possibility of deductive identification, providing a code book, answering questions about getting the data read in to be able to analyze. Software would be actually building, if we were programming things into Qualtrics or REDCap to do the data collection. This also, as I read it, is something that if someone else wrote the code that we're adapting for an analysis, then they could get points for providing the software. So this would be particularly of interest to people like Josh Langfus or Leah Follett that have written our code, that Rachel Kang, people that have written our code that they're sharing and other people are then using as a core module of the work that they're doing on a project. The formal analysis is the statistical analysis. Validation is the cross-checking the results. Visualization. I was really excited to see credit including that in their taxonomy, because you can put a lot of work. It's a lot of work to make a really good figure that tells a story, supports the narrative. And they're like, yeah, we agree. That also is something that those people deserve credit, probably named credit if they do enough of them or contribute enough other things to the project. So supervision would be if you're doing clinical interviews, having the person that is training the raters, leading the consensus diagnostic meetings, things along those lines. The other things that you'll see here that aren't recognized by credit, but they are recognized by us and HGAPS, are getting the project woven into open science platforms. So getting the files up onto OSF.io, getting links and connections onto Wikiversity and, if appropriate, Wikipedia pages, getting the figures up onto Commons so that you could include them in wiki articles. All of those things are extra work. They're big value adds to the project because they're helping with the dissemination. They're reaching a larger audience with it. It's going to pay dividends in terms of more people finding it, using it. Your alt metrics will go up, and probably your citations will too. But because it's more work, the person who does it deserve some credit. So we could go through each of these, and I could explain every single thing. If you have ideas about other things that would be important for a particular project, this is a template, save it and customize it for your project. So as you think of other things, and when you're talking with people and they're like, hey, but what about this? I did this and I don't see where to put it on just add a row. And as long as everybody on the team understands what the thing is, then you're good. So questions about the roles. And some of them like the post-submission revisions and writing the response letter and things like that, those you don't worry about when you're first writing the paper. That is what all this block comes after you get the reviews back and you get the cherished revise and resubmit with page after page of things that you need to do. So next column is the points. These are this is not science. These are sort of starting values, and this is completely up for discussion. How many points should you get for coming up with the idea? Well, when I was in graduate school, people were like, well, without the big idea, there is no project. And it usually was the professors who were coming up with the big idea. And they're like, and that's why I deserve a lot of credit, because I had the ideas. There's a lot, some circles, there's a lot of value on the conceptualization. So those people would look at that and be like, 5 points out of all of these points, that's a little low for this, don't you think? Where I have been for a long time is I have more ideas than I have time. And so I threw out a point value of 5 points because, like, for me, ideas are easy. Time is the scarce ingredient, and having a team that actually is helping to get this done is, and so I would prefer not to hog a huge helping of points. I'd be like, yeah, no, this is one of many ideas. The having everyone else contributing is really crucial to this. But if you're like, no, this is a really big idea and it should count for more points, if the whole team is like, yeah, we're good with that, then run that way. The paper team coordinator manager, this is the other place that water carriers could be. This is a relatively new addition, and that could be redundant with the Peach 1 down below. This is working with the credit system is relatively new to me. I encountered it for the first time in January of 2022. So there are probably going to be opportunities to tighten things up. Writing an outline. It feels like extra work a lot of times at the beginning, but it will always save you time by the end. So making a good outline, if somebody does that, I would give that a chunk of points. Literature review is actually finding the papers that are going to be helpful for the citations. The writing the abstract, usually the last thing that I do. Lead is what you would call the opening paragraph, opening section of a wiki article. And wiki articles have somewhat different rules than peer-reviewed research articles usually do. But it is the biggest audience, bigger than pretty much any blog, way bigger than any research article. And the lead is also, I would suggest, the last thing that you should write. And also the abstract and the lead, you really want to have be good. So that's they're short, but they take some of the most thought, and they're worth the most polishing, because that may be the only thing that most people read, and it's your only hope of getting people to read the rest of it. So that's your handshake. You really want to have a good handshake. The depending on the type of article that you're doing, you may have whole sections that have no points. If you're doing a review article, like at Carolina, we have a comprehensive exam where you're supposed to write, your comps paper is writing a review article about a topic of your choice. So there is no data analysis. So there would be no points for the formal analysis. There would be no points for the validation. There would be no points for the statistical analysis. The so those things go away entirely in a review paper. In meta-analysis, there might not be any enrollment. So the things that are specific to, like, there's no interviewing, there's no supervision in that sense, but there's a lot of work on the searching and the coding the articles, getting them into a data format that you could actually run the analyses on. So where I'm going with this is that as you think about your project, you could save a copy of this, delete the rows that have nothing to do with your paper, or you could leave them and just type 0, 0, 0. Like, there are no points for this. It's not part of the project. It's actually probably less work to just type the zeros. Leave it alone, type the zeros. That's like one keystroke to zero it out. And how many points should you put on the other things? It's really up to you. But what you're doing is saying, here's where the value in the paper is coming from. These are the things that are really important to this paper should be worth more points. The things that are harder to do should be worth more points. Well, what's the right number? It's going to depend on the project. Who decides what's right? The team does, you do. And it's kind of a negotiation in a way. A lot of teams sort of do this very, very easily, very, very smoothly. But if somebody is like, well, I think that my contribution is worth 50% of the points, other people may not want to help on the project. They may vote with their feet. So that's where the point values come from. Questions to this point?
So if for each section, so if just like using one that you have up, for instance, like conceptualization, say that like you and John both came up with the project, do you each get 5 points, or do you split the 5 points between the two of you?
That is a great question. And that was exactly where I was going next. We would divide up the points. So this particular one, the conceptualization of the AARF was definitely me. The thinking about the paper and what would go into the paper, I've already generated a mind map and have all the ideas written down and things like that. So the conceptualization, I feel, is pretty far along. And so we might go with something like 500 for the conceptualization. The paper team coordinator manager, we've got 6 points here. And we could, and the outline was what I just flashed. The project team coordinator or manager, this is a pretty small team that we're using for this particular paper. And what we're doing is actually filling this in for this is kind of meta. We're recording a talk about the AARF, and we're filling out an AARF for writing the paper about the AARF, which is pretty cool. But so if one of you guys was going to be the paper team coordinator manager, then you would get the points, or we could divide them up. So Natalie already made the folder for this, so she's already sort of started to function in this role. John made the template that we're using, the magenta in a box, to build out the projects. So we're using some things that John made, and Natalie's doing them. So I'm like, I don't know, let's do that 3, 3, and 0, or 2, 2, 2, divide them up that way. The lit review, I've done a little bit. I would like help. So I've got a couple things. The one of you could be like, oh, I'll do the search and toss the stuff in. And we would just sort of go through the whole thing and divide up who's doing what, and then have a kickoff meeting for the project and say, here's what we're thinking in terms of dividing up the work. Everybody good with this? People happy with the point amounts? All right, let's rock and roll. Let's go forth and write a paper. In project planning mode, which is what we're illustrating live in this recording right now, what also can happen is we can identify gaps. We're like, oh, if we really want to do fancy statistical analyses, do you know how to do those? Do you know how to do? Does anybody here know how to do those? What would be great would be if we could find someone that already knows how to do them and get them involved in the project. And so you're identifying gaps on the team, and then you're going hunting for a collaborator that has the specific skill or information that would round out the team. And so you're able to, and this actually, you have a higher chance of getting a yes from a busy person if you are using this sort of approach, because you're going to them with a very focused request. It's not like, would you like to write a paper with me? Please. You're like, hi, we're approaching you because we got a team that's working on a paper, and we've already taken care of all of these things. The very specific need that we have, the way that we would love to get you involved would be to specifically help with the statistical analyses, or looking at the introduction and discussion and making sure that we're really communicating the clinical relevance of what we're doing. Or so you're going with a very specific ask, which is much easier for the person to understand and say yes to. And the icing on the cake of the request would be, of course, if you want to do more or have suggestions for other things or other ways of making it better, we would love that too. But what we really are hoping is that you would at least be able to do this thing. So you have, and this actually makes it easier to approach the outline. And as you are starting work on the paper, you're also able to divide and conquer. So as you have a team working on this, Some people are going to be concentrating on the results section and making the tables and the figures. Other people are going to be working on the literature review and the introduction and the discussion section. And other people are going to, if you're using a reference manager, like Zotero or EndNote or Mendeley, the reference list actually takes care of itself. And so in the old days, I had a section and points for building the reference list, but now the software does that for you. So I've moved those points to who's getting the stuff into Zotero. So we use this to build the team. We review this as we launch the team. The next time that we would look at this in depth together again is when we have the thing ready to submit. When we send the paper to the journal, that is when they ask us to list who are the authors and what order are they in, and more journals are now asking in more and more detail, and what did they contribute. So in the old days, the authors were who got listed on the front page of the paper, and there was a lot of politics often that went into deciding who got listed and what was the order that they got listed. People get very caught up on the order and who comes where on the list. In the big picture, not all disciplines, not all areas of scholarship think about this the same way. And and there's certain spots that are cooler than others in psychology and psychiatry, which are the two areas that I've published in the most, know the most about, have paid the most attention to. First author is usually considered the coolest. Second author is the next coolest in psychology and also cool in psychiatry. Last author on the list in psychology is like, oh yeah, and this person too. But in psychiatry and in many hard sciences, the last author is the senior author. They're the person who is the PI of the lab or the research group. So there are three spots that people sometimes pay attention to: first, second, and last. The way that the AARF points are set up, if you just line people up in order of points, then the person who did the most work is going to be in line for first authorship. That's pretty cool. The person who did the second most work is lined up to be the second author, and the person who did the least work would then be the last author. So one of the things that I said at the beginning is this is a way of guiding discussions around authorship, but we don't have to follow it strictly. So if you're working with somebody who is a senior investigator or a big dog, or if you're a graduate student and you're working with your advisor, my suggestions would be to ask that person, would you like to be second or last, or are you not worried about where you are in the order? For me, I'm a psychologist, and it's been great having three cool positions on papers, because I can have my student be first author, and I can be second author, and the psychiatrist that I'm working with can be last author, and everybody is happy. I've said a lot about authorship order, but honestly, my advice is the most important thing is just make sure if you have done enough work to be an author that you're listed somewhere. The difference between being listed and not listed is huge. The difference between being third author and fifth author or seventh author is minuscule. So it is, my opinion, it is not worth the headache and heartache of fighting over changing your order. It is better to be easy to work with, get along with others, and have people invite you to do more with them. So arm wrestling a little less about authorship order has been really good to me in the long run, in terms of people being like, he's an easy guy to work with, so of course we'll invite him to work with us again. So the next time that we look at the AARF is right as we're getting ready to send something in, because we need to figure out who are the authors who did enough to be listed, and what order do we want to list them in for the journal. And there should never be any surprises when something gets sent to the journal or when something gets published. I really, really mean it. Back in the first couple minutes of this, I was like, here are three life events that shaped my thinking about this. One of them was me being listed as an author on the front page, me as an author on the correspondence about the revise and resubmit, and then picking up the journal and looking at the article, and surprise, I was disappeared. I was canceled. And that should never happen. That was a horrendous feeling. So I really, really strongly urge you to review this before you submit it to the journal. Journals don't usually have a deadline for you to submit stuff. It's rolling submissions. So there's no reason to rush. There's no reason to cut this corner. The only time that there's a deadline is if you're working on a special issue. And so that then you do have a deadline, and do not fall into the trap of sending the paper and not having discussed authorship with everyone. That will burn bridges if it happens. So you send it in, you wait, and best case scenario, you get a revise and resubmit. And if you've seen one of these, you know that they're like a shit sandwich. They're like, this paper had many strengths. And then they crack their knuckles and they're like, and here's everything that we hated about it, or that we want changed, or that we want fixed. And then it closes with but it did have some strengths, kind of. So as you get the reviews, the best ones actually are the detailed ones, because they're giving you a blueprint to do this, do this, do this, do this. And if you work their list, you're going to get accepted. The ones that I hate are the really short ones. They're like, didn't like it. I'm like, but you're not telling me how to make it better. You're not giving me anything to, so as you look at the list of things to do, the way that I approach it is I copy them and paste them into a document that I can share with the rest of the team. I'm using Google Docs right now for that. So I copy and paste all the reviews in, and then we go through and we look at them all, and we jot down notes about how are we going to respond to it. And then the ones that are actually work, we divide up. And we're like, okay, who's going to do this? Who's going to do this? And sometimes they're asking for more literature. Add these citations. So somebody's like, I'll do that. I'll track down the PDFs. I'll add them to Zotero. And someone else is like, and I'll go ahead and draft the discussion. Oh, I was going to do that. Okay, well, you go ahead and do that. Sometimes they want a whole new set of analyses. So then we're like, huh, who's going to do the analyses? And then look at the points that you had for the analyses before and think about these new ones. Are they the same amount of work? Are they more work? Are they less work? Let's give the points for the reanalysis like that. So this verse is kind of the same as the team building. Hey, we now need a team we need team revision. Who's going to do what on team revision? And then as you have the revision ready to go, look at the ARF again and say who actually, we know what the plan was, who actually was able to do what, agree on the authorship order. Sometimes the authorship order changes from what it was initially. Sometimes it's the same people doing more of the work, and so the authorship order doesn't change. And you send it back. Last time that you might use this is when the paper gets accepted. If you're very conscientious and meticulous, you might save a copy of this, like, and here is the final who did what, broken down by the accepted version. A couple other things I want to comment on about this. One is that this keeps track of who did what even in early days. What I've seen happen with other labs, other papers, is the people that helped with the data collection have graduated and moved on to other things by the time that somebody else gets around to analyzing it and writing it up. And so the people that helped build it, the people that laid the foundation, they're gone and forgotten. Sometimes it takes years to write papers, and the people that contributed to the first draft of the paper have graduated, moved on, and they tend to get forgotten and not included. So the people who are around when the data are ready to analyze tend to get more publication credit than the people that actually did the blood, sweat, and tears of getting the data in the first place. I've been a graduate student. That doesn't seem fair to me. Still doesn't now. So I'm like, yeah, no, let's build a system that keeps track of who did stuff through the whole life cycle of the project. The other thing that I want to call out is I've said review the ARF before you submit the paper. You had a plan and you had the point values divided up, but then life happens and people get busy in unexpected ways. People get pulled into other projects. So it's very, very rare to have the plan match the reality of how. So I don't mean this in a mean way or a judgy way. This is just a factual old guy sharing some observations about how things work. So it's really important. And for those of you who have ever done a team project, teamwork, and you hate team projects because you were the good worker, the good student, and you got stuck with some slackers who are like, we're just going to put our feet up because John and Natalie can't help themselves. They're so worried about doing well. They'll do a really good job on this, even if I don't break a sweat or do doodly squat. This is the moment you have been waiting for, because you'll be like, huh, I see that you were supposed to do this, but I think that actually was Leah that did that. And I think it actually was John that ran the analyses. And so you get to be like, yeah, no, the other people did the work, so they're getting those points. That's the moment of reckoning that that really should happen. So in business speak, the ARF is high transparency. You can see exactly what the division of work was supposed to be, and it's high accountability. You actually need to do the work. No points just for promises, points for delivering the goods. So
I have another question.
yes, I was just gonna ask, what questions do people have at this point?
If there's a disagreement about points, does the
Mhm.
water carrier get final say? Should it be a team vote situation? Like, who settles a dispute if someone thinks that they did more than what the team actually thinks they contributed?
I haven't seen that come up a lot. I'm sure that it will in the fullness of time, people being people. But it's kind of cool that I'm like, you know, I haven't seen a lot of that. Um, so that's good news, but I don't think that we should dodge the question. Um, I think that you threw out a couple different suggestions that all have some merit. So some teams might be very democratic and be like, well, let's vote on it, have a majority vote. Um, and I think that would be particularly good if you have a team of people who are at very similar stage of career development. If you have a team that includes some more senior people, or you're working within your lab, and then I would say take it to your professor, take it to the senior person. The water carrier, I think, is an excellent like the tiebreaker or the decider for a lot of teams. I think that would be great, and that sort of reinforces that you're first among equals in some important ways with the project. So I think any of those would be good, and I think that the PI or senior investigators on the project are great as a backup if the dispute actually involves the water carrier. Then that would be a way of cleanly resolving that. Great question. What else you got? So the template that we're giving you guys has a formula put in, which is just adding up all of the points in all of the rows above it. So we've got some blank rows here where you could add additional activities and categories. You can change the point values, but this is just sort of doing the math for you. That's one of the nice things about spreadsheets. So then we've got the adjustments row, and the managing talk page and discussion is a very wiki specific thing. The adjustments would be in the fine print down here. So this, not a superscript, but in parentheses too. Adjustments are based on recommendations from ethical guidelines. And I thought that I was getting the more points for younger people earlier in their career. I thought I was getting that from the APA ethical guidelines, but a couple of you fact checked me on that, and they're like, no, it's actually not in there. So I think I may have made that up. I think that where that came from is reading Eric Erikson and thinking about stages of life development and thinking about the second to last stage in his model is generativity and wanting the world to be a better place and wanting to help the next generation, wanting to help your children, wanting to help your students. But the first set of bonuses is, are you younger in career than I am? So the suggested point value is 15 15 points minus a year for each year of education since you got your BA or your BS. Where that number came from was when I invented it, I was exactly 15 years away from my BA. So like I said, I've been using this for a while. So what that was saying was, if you're me, you get no bonus points. If you're older than me, if you're more senior in your career, no bonus points for you either. If you're younger than me, you get some bonus points. How many? Depends on how much younger you are. So all of my graduate students got bonus points. Undergraduates working with me got bonus points. As I've been doing more with HGAPS, this gets a little bit weird as you're like, I haven't graduated yet. I don't have my BA. So you could, for your team, be like, well, what's your anticipated graduation date? You're 2 years away, so you get 17 bonus points. Or Bree Sisk and the NCSSM students, Bree Sisk, Lillian Pitts, they're the ones that would be record setters in terms of bonus points if we extended it that way. I'd be curious to try it and see how it works. The other thing that did come from the APA ethical guidelines is, if this is students' work, if this is a student's honors thesis or master's thesis or dissertation, they should be first author on it unless there are exceptional circumstances. So there's another bonus, and it's a big bonus for it being your thesis or your dissertation. This is, if you're in a research active lab and program, your dissertation is just going to be one of many papers. So if this were a sport, this would be like putting the franchise tag on one and saying, hey, this one I want to claim as my dissertation. If you use the AARF system, it's unusual. Most people think of a dissertation as something that they have to do by themselves, or a thesis as something that they have to do by themselves. But if you really work this system, this is something that you would be like, hey, it's my project. I'm in charge of it. I get the most credit, but I could still build a team. I could still involve other people with this. And that's a game changer. I've only seen about 20% of students that I've worked with really quickly see this and actually use it as a way of organizing their masters or dissertation. But the ones that do, it's extremely effective. The last bonus is the rescuer bonus. And this is one relatively new addition for me, but we've had a lot of papers. I have more, I don't know how many it is. My list of pain is probably between 50 and 100 papers that we had the idea, we had the data, we did the analyses, we have a draft, and it's never been published. Why has it never been published? Because the student was the first author and they got busy. Life happened, they moved in a different direction, they got busy. And because it was tied to their thesis or their dissertation or whatever, no one else has any interest in picking it up and helping with it, because there's no way that that person could get high authorship credit for it. So the rescuer bonus is something to offset the insurmountable advantage of it being tied to a student project. And the APA guidelines say the student should be the first author unless there are exceptional circumstances. So ghosting for a year seems like a reasonable operational definition of an exceptional circumstance. So those are the types of things that we're looking at for the bonus points. The younger you are in your career, the more impressive it is to have made that type of contribution. If it's a student thesis or dissertation, big helping of bonus points to reflect it's their project. And the rescuer bonus for the special case of we have an important paper that has been stalled for years. Can we bring somebody in and give them a bonus to prioritize actually getting the paper out where people can find it and benefit from it. The last part in the fine print is the having a trigger to get the bonuses. The trigger is you need to do at least 10% of the work. You need to, your contributions subtotal needs to be at least 10% of the total number of points on the project. Otherwise, you don't get the bonus. The reason this is here is to prevent people from gaming the system. Imagine an intern being like, hey, I want to be involved in this project. They do 1 point worth of stuff. You barely ever see them again. And then they're like, but I'm really young. I demand my 15 bonus points. And then suddenly they're like, and I think I should be 3rd author or 4th author on this. That's happened precisely once. As soon as it happened, I'm like, oh, I need to close that loophole. And so I'm like, no, you yin yang, you and like having to do at least 1/10 of the work seems like a pretty low bar. Like, I don't think that this is being really, really harsh. I'm like, you got to do something that people are like, yeah, that was a noticeable contribution, and then unleash all the bonus points. So all the stuff in the fine print is stuff that got added over time with experience. This is actually a very battle-tested model that I'm sharing. This is something that we've been using for decades, and we've had some edge cases that have tested what the boundaries and the limits are. And we've closed a bunch of loopholes over the years. Other questions? So then the stuff that I skipped past over here is the metadata and organizational stuff. So the project working title is would be things like Natalie's master's, Natalie's dissertation. You already have your master's. Natalie's dissertation, John's comps paper, or or HCL manual in the cloud, that's not the title that you're actually going to put on the final journal article, but we don't usually know what that title is going to be until pretty close to the end. So we have a working title. All of my projects we number because the title keeps changing. People come and go on teams sometimes, so the team changes, so the number is stable. The primary author would be the primary author could be the first author, or this could be the water carrier, the corresponding author. The other authors and their initials. The reason that I asked for the initials is because if you have a lot of authors, it gets hard to fit long names in, and so just putting the initials lets you tighten up the formatting of the table. The target journal would be where are you trying to send it. The target audience is what type of reader are you writing for? Are you writing for other researchers? Are you writing for teachers? Are you writing for clinicians? Are you writing for the general public? The dates would be the target dates that the team sets, or if you're working on a special issue or something for a grant, then it'll be an external deadline. The submission target is when you're trying to have the draft ready to go. When you actually submitted it is after life happens. The revised and resubmitted date, pretty straightforward. Does it need IRB approval? Journals will ask. If it does, you'll want to know which university or institution reviewed it and approved it, and it would probably be smart to have the approval number. The data files, if it's a data paper, what I like to see here is the exact name of the file that you used. So John, with the HCL, you've gotten more than one update of the file, and so the one that you actually used for the analyses in the paper would be the file name, and it's just copying and pasting the file name in. And the syntax files would be the R notebook or markdown. Was the project brought through Writer's Workshop? There've been a couple of years that we've used writing accountability groups or writing support groups. The fellowship team writing group that we're looking at putting together this summer would be an example of one of those. The acknowledgement section, journals have pretty strict rules about acknowledgements. That's kind of surprising. Seems like it would be just like a nice thing to thank some people. But what I would suggest is if you have people that did some stuff on the project, but it was less than 10% of the points, list them in the acknowledgements. If there are other people that you think would be nice to acknowledge, check the rules with the journal. The sources of support would be listing the grants that supported the project. A little thing that I've learned over the years, if the project can claim that it was supported by a federal grant or some foundation grants, then the publisher is required to make a version of the paper available by open access. So I actually would look for opportunities to link your project to federal grants, or even if they're not paying for your time on it, if there's a way to legitimately claim that, that's going to turn your publication into a semi-open access publication. In the US, there would be a 1-year embargo, but then a version of it would get released. Other support for authors, this would be where you might start tracking some of the conflict of interest information and disclosures, listing out that it's student work so that you have a justification for the student bonuses, financial conflict of interest. And if you guys often will have versions of the work presented at conferences ahead of time. And so listing those here, some journals ask, has any of this ever been presented anywhere? And so having that listed is helpful. The author contact info is a place that you can put the people's emails, their department, their affiliation, their disclosures, their ORCID, which is an identifying number for an author that is free and very helpful to have. If you're in HGAPS, then you probably have a wiki account, and you may have an hgaps.org as a backup email. But this is something that you could have your team fill out as you're getting close to submitting the paper. And then the person that's putting everything in the portal is going to have all the information that they need, right, packaged with the AARF. So that completes the tour. We've gone pretty deep on the table and how you build a team by adding a column for each person, and each row is the activity, and you divide up all the work, and then you do the work and you get back together and you review who actually did what work and adjust the points, add the bonuses if there are bonuses to be had, discuss the author order, and then everybody's on the same page about who's an author and who's not and why, and what's the order and why. And then you send it to the journal, you get the revise and resubmit, which is more work. So you divide up the work, you assign the points, you do the work, you review the work that got done, you update things, you send it back, and you cross your fingers. And if you get a R2, revise and resubmit again, then wash, rinse, repeat until you get the paper published. And then you celebrate and you're like, okay, this was a really good team. What do we want to do next? And you do it again.